Well, it's great to be back here. What a wonderful event this is to meet so many terrific people. You know, Peter Drucker's most famous quote is, "The purpose of a company is to create a customer." And the two primary functions of a company are innovation and marketing, kind of the same thing. He said everything else is cost. So we're talking about innovation, ecosystems, because we want to increase our ability to innovate. Why? Because innovation is the primary path to growth, prosperity, meaningful jobs, and resources for social responsibility and defense. I'd like to run a little poll here. How many of you are value creators? I see. Most of you. How many belong to an organization where everybody believes they're a value creator? Not very many hands. If I went into your company and I asked different people to describe their innovation system, would there be a pretty good answer from everybody? How many of you have that? Even fewer hands. Not very many. So if I walked around and I asked people, what's the definition for innovation? Your job? What's the definition of customer value? And most importantly, what's the definition for a value proposition? Would most of the professional staff know the answers to all three of those questions? How many of you would? If I went into your organization. Ooh, I'm only seeing a few hands now. Well, we're going to come back to that. In the United States, innovative performance is generally pretty poor. We hear about the successes, we don't hear about all the failures. We come to a place like Drucker, and that's all we hear is successes. But that's not most of the world. In the United States, we have 1,300 incubators, most of them lose money. Essentially, all tech transfer programs in America lose money, unless they have a drug. Almost all government national lab work produces almost nothing. In Silicon Valley, where Young and I live, almost all the venture capitalists lose money every year. 5% make 95% of the returns. And even when we do workshops with big companies, we find that less than 30% of what they're working on has no value. So we're going to talk about today things that could profoundly improve that performance. And we have, as I'll introduce them, an amazing panel here of how do we develop innovation ecosystems, what are the new ingredients, what do we need to do going forward. We're going to talk a little bit about the past, but we want to mostly know what's going forward. And I think we're going to have some interesting insights from our brilliant panel for you. So I'm going to introduce them all. Just one more comment before I do. You know, I come from Silicon Valley, and it kind of set the tone for the model. You have a great university, you do R&D, a company comes in, a semiconductor company, and it brings in intrinsic knowledge, not just knowledge, intrinsic knowledge from people who actually know what to do. And those people create businesses, and then some of the people leave, and they start a whole series of spin-offs, and that's why it's called Silicon Valley. So we want, in our discussion, to go beyond kind of the obvious formula that everybody knows that works, but what's going to happen to change that and make it much more productive? So with that, I'd like to introduce young Sohn. He's a MIT grad. It's always a good start. He's corporate vice president and chief strategy officer for Samsung Electronics and chairman of the board of Harman, which he bought for $8 billion, I think. He was CEO of 3 startups in Silicon Valley and took them all public. That means he's kind of a Babe Ruth in Silicon Valley. There aren't many people who have done that as successfully as Young has. And I think Young really represents a major shift in Samsung in terms of hiring a true Silicon Valley, a proven true Silicon Valley entrepreneur to play a transformative role in Samsung. What are we going to see going forward?
Well, I bring a couple of slides to talk about it, but start with I thank you for the opportunity to join this very impressive forum. I spent some time yesterday listening and realizing how critical this ecosystem is. And clearly, Samsung benefit from tremendous, what I call network effect of technologies that are enabling changes. So maybe I can have a couple of slides I can talk about, or just stand up, make it a little easier. And the point, I think, is that all of you in your pocket have a very massive computing power. And that's what I call mobile 1.0. And I think that 1.0 would not be happen by any one particular companies or one geography. Today, you are moving your phones without thinking about geography because of all the work that was done between the different standards that came together, collaborated, invested, and being able to give you the smartphone experience in your pocket. So this is an ecosystem that was built because many of folks out there, thousands and thousands of companies, came together to make that happen. And the question, I think, is going forward, what is the 2.0? So as I'm thinking about that, I was trying to reflect, the mobile phone can look at as something with you every 24/7, especially if you're teenagers. And I'm not sure whether that's a really good thing for you. I'm sure there's a lot of sociologists worry about technology invading the privacy and how you manage those things. But there are also clear benefits that came with the technology. And I want to just make sure it's not the technology good or bad. Technology is what we deliver, and the question of how we use the technology for our benefit. So this chart, I'm sure some of you that like the movies, that's a Goldie Gecko. That is the movie called Wall Street. And remember the phone he had. That's a brick. It's a phone that is so heavy that you can only talk about 30 minutes. And it was so expensive. That was a true have and have not opportunity. For those who could afford to talk to anybody. And it was really short talk time. And today, and by the way, you couldn't do any text messaging back then. Today, obviously, if you look at some of our state-of-art phones, you can be able to do so much more than just phone by itself. You can learn a lot about your body. You can learn a lot about your psychology. You can also read the social medias that you couldn't be able to reach in the past. So clearly, there's a lot of benefit that technology have brought. The question is then, where are we going next if this is mobility 1.0? And I think the 2.0 is even as exciting going forward. And as I look at that opportunities, it's all about connected world. It's about being able to drive better because we have capabilities to have an autonomous driving, for instance, or better robots, or better health that can assist you in your day-to-day living. I think the issue here is really to do that. It's not just, again, tech companies solving the problems. It's a tech along with the health, along with the regulatory bodies, or along with the traditional car OEMs. They have to all work together to solve very complex system problem for long term. I don't believe autonomous driving will happen 2019. I remember someone said that. Do you guys remember who? But anyway, I'm not going to quote who that was, but clearly some of the visionary in Silicon Valley thought autonomous driving could happen 2019. I don't think so. I think it's going to take much longer, mainly because it's not just the sensors. It's not about cloud. It's not about data. It's about the new definition of safety. When you are driving, you're clearly responsible for your driving. When the machine drives, who is responsible? What impact does it have on regulation? What impact does it have on your insurance plans? So it changes the whole equation. Then obviously, you cannot have a slow network. The milliseconds can kill you or save you. So you need to have a 5G type of technologies that can be able to give you very short latency, so that you can be able to respond in real time, and that means hitting somebody or not hitting somebody. So I think that we are in a journey of mobility 2.0 that can help you to deliver many things that we don't have today. Maybe now you can use the drones to deliver goods and medicines to some mountaintop in Swiss Alps so that you don't have to spend all that time driving. Some great benefits. Same time, I think we have to think about many other regulatory, the dimension of the benefits and collaborations that are required by multiple disciplines. It's a huge opportunity. When I say Mobility 2.0, it isn't about phone. It's about services. It's about applications. It's about being mobile and being able to bring the benefit to everybody. To do that, it's a long-term investment. This is not a short-term, and it requires a tremendous investment from all industry to collaborate. Just changing from combustion engine to electrification sounds easy, right? Just take out the motor sound and plug in batteries. But it requires massive investment in terms of battery capacity. The battery that we need tomorrow require 10 to 100 times more capacity than we have today. We may not have enough rare materials to support that. How do you create an ecosystem to support new batteries that can give you all the electrification? 5G, a lot of discussion going on. People say it's going to require multiple $1 trillion worth of investment to enable that. There is a lot of discussion about what's the right standard. Is it the standard coming from geography? And how do you manage the conflict so that we have the seamless communication? I think the other thing is, of course, as you're all connected, how do you discuss and how do you manage your data? Especially if it's your health data, if it's your automotive data. All your data isn't just about some preference, it's about your personal data. I believe the data should belong to you. So this is the data era that we have to think about. How to use your data to get better insight, but yet data belongs to you. And I think that discussion is going to be a very important one that will continue to have a big debate going forward. So what we try to do to enable this ecosystem is about making sure we have a very long-term investment in core technologies, whether it's the semiconductors, whether it's the 5G. These are massive investment. Next 3 years, we have announced we're going to spend $160 billion to just in R&D to enable these technologies to enable that. On the top of that, we are working with many partners to enable technology because at the end of the day, nobody can create these things by yourself. So we have to work with many partners. In Austria, we work with the TTTech. I'm glad Georg is here to talk about his view. But clearly, working with the best players around the world that can contribute to the ecosystem is a very important part of our way to advance some of very difficult ecosystem. Now, today, we are really also talking about innovation. Most innovation doesn't come from big companies. Most innovation comes from startups because they take risk. The question is, how do we work with innovators around the world and big corporations and bridge and create a highway of communication? So we have announced nonprofit, and this is not a Samsung play. This is actually something I'm personally involved, called Extreme Tech Challenge. I was an athlete once, so my goal was really improving performance with athletes, and that's how we began. But recently, after joining the President Macron's Tech Council, we spent a lot of time about tech for good. So I realized I have to do something myself. So we created and pivoted my organization from Extreme Tech Challenge for extreme athletes to actually migrating that into UN 17 sustainability goals. And enabling startups to focus on that so that we can educate, we can aspire, we can be able to select winners and connect to the corporations so we can be able to create an accelerator between startup idea to corporations. Something that I like to see if you have a great startups that are involved in solving big problems, whether inclusion, water problems, air problems, food issues, these all matters, education, health. So we want to make sure startup community involved. June 10th next year at Viva Tech in Paris, we'll be announcing the winners coming from global competition. So this is one of the nonprofit PR. I hope you don't mind that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Young, one question. You're describing, you're telling us the scale of this problem and how huge it is. Even a company of your size, $150 billion is a lot of money. And there are going to be dozens of other companies that have to invest as much, really, in total. And you need to leverage the ecosystem with startups. So it's a massive amount of coordination and collaboration that's required. How do you think we could do better at that? Because that really is at the heart of what you're describing.
Right. So I think there are two things. I do kite surfing, so I always look at everything in the context of headwinds or tailwinds. Those are helping me or those slow me down. And if I look at it in the context of headwinds, I think the geo tension that we're living with today, the geo conflict will force us to have very difficult decisions about what's the standard. Is it standard in China, standard in US, and standard in Europe? Just simple thing as that sounds easy, but we're talking about now fragmentation. So it's something that I know a very difficult subject. The benefit of mobility was the fact that we had a unified architecture. It worked with a small company out of Cambridge, UK, called ARM, creating digital microprocessors, and then small company in Silicon Valley that creates some softwares called Android, as an example, or Apple, the fruit company. They all create on its own ecosystem to enable. But at the end of the day, fragmentation is not good because fragmentation will slow us down. So the question is, that's the headwinds that I worry about. The tailwinds that I like is the fact that the cloud is here and the people are available. The technology can come from anywhere. So really, I believe there is a connected world where we can benefit most talents around anywhere, and great idea come from anywhere is really a positive thing.
Okay. And obviously, the technology feeds on this and helps feedback to accelerate that. Let's move now to Sascha Haselmayer, who is founder and CEO of Citymart. He's actually an architect by training in urban design, and he works with companies all over the world, helping them with logistics and a lot of their operational issues, and also involving many entrepreneurs and innovators into the process to see how they can better fix cities and make them more productive. Sascha?
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I want to kind of build a bridge from where Young ended in terms of how do we connect innovation ecosystems to societal outcomes. And I want to tell a little bit the story of how communities and local governments began to play a part in these global innovation ecosystems. So up until about 20 years ago, when we talked about innovation ecosystems, we imagined big suburban technology parks where technology companies and research centers had their campuses, and we kind of had the rocket science communities that were hidden away from where we other people, like architects, lived and worked. That has started to change significantly. Innovators have moved from the countryside, so to speak, into the heart of our cities. And part of this was that the quality of place became important, the places we meet, how we interact, the flexibility, and in many ways also the democratization of innovation, that everyone could be part of it, and we were building all these new connections. Cities became an enabler of entirely new models, and I think one of the examples is that nowadays we have entire innovation ecosystems in a single building. One example is a place called New Lab. It's a building in Brooklyn where I live that is offering a complete innovation ecosystem for hundreds of technology companies doing manufacturing, software engineering. There's investment, there's government engagement, and there's a global marketing capacity. And the reason why that is possible is that the city around this building is offering all the additional resources that actually sustain this single building ecosystem. And what this has done is that we're able to create super productive innovation ecosystems. Now, as local governments started to see these things happening on their doorstep, they became part of becoming the planner of what is surrounding these ecosystems. They became part funder that is investing in those ecosystems, and they became a user of those ecosystems. So I consider an ecosystem mature when even the most conservative entity on earth, the local government, is beginning to become a user of innovation ecosystems. So today, just a few years down into this, we are tracking hundreds and hundreds of local governments around the world that are spending the 10% of GDP that they have in purchasing power to buy from these ecosystems and begin to set the agenda. And that agenda is, not surprisingly, very much aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, to the needs of communities. And that investment today amounts to about $45 billion a year that is inserted into these urban innovation ecosystems. So as we're seeing this change happening, we found one surprise. One thing that really surprised us is as we were kind of opening up these transactions and effectively leveling the playing field, we found that it's not only the scientists and engineers who are the beneficiaries of this, but in fact that local, small and medium-sized, often women and minority-owned businesses are winning half of these contracts. So we found that opening up to innovation, bringing it into our communities, suddenly stimulated a much wider economic ecosystem. So local government became part of setting the agenda, and part of that agenda was to really take society along on this journey. So policymakers today are reevaluating their perceptions on what innovation ecosystems are. And for example, the city of Santa Monica has looked at what has happened in San Francisco over the last 20 years and said, this is not the future we want for our community. There's so many things right about the Silicon Valley innovation ecosystem economically, and there's so many things wrong about what it does for society. It has not delivered prosperity for everyone. It has not delivered equality. It has not delivered economic opportunity for everyone. It has created more inequality than before. So Santa Monica said innovation does not necessarily mean progress for everyone. And they set out on a journey where they said our local economy needs to chart its own course. And the city started to identify 3 major threats to its local economic model coming up in the near future. One was the change in retail and what that would mean to its economy. The other one is in mobility, and the third one is in workforce impact through AI. And they said, this challenge is not something we're going to hire a consultant to tell us what to do behind closed doors. So they invited experts from around the world to educate the city council and the community about these trends and what they mean for them. And so they are in a process, a multi-year process of co-creating not a plan, not a strategy for their ecosystem, but a common set of values and a common set of criteria and measurable outcomes that they're pursuing. So I want to wrap this up, and I want to say that the future, I think, of productive innovation ecosystems is those that are able to solve a variety of problems and those that are capable of delivering meaningful innovation. And one other thing we're seeing, and I just want to see this kind of as an idea, that innovation ecosystems are seeded into many projects. So, for example, major infrastructure projects or urban transformation projects in cities are now the catalyst to create new innovation ecosystems, because government also is becoming more agile and wants to kind of secure that their big investments are optimized along the way and involve a number of new parties.
Great. Well, that's very encouraging. We've been talking about mega innovation ecosystems, and you're now talking about mini. And the empowerment of people, which has been a big theme of this conference, of how do you empower people, give them control. You think that's what's happening to San Francisco? This is a bit that other regions will be emphasizing more than what's happened to San Francisco. The development of these more local ecosystems. And obviously what Young talked about is an empowering element to make it easier to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely, I think there are 2 parts of it. We kind of accidentally stumbled into radically opening up these ecosystems to new participants, but also there is a clear intention from society about what they want these ecosystems to deliver. We cannot continue to kind of invest in inequality, and we need to understand that technology is not just disrupting economic models, but has also not yet fully contributed to bringing along other parts of society as in the way that we want to.
Right. Okay, thank you. Next is Patricia Neumann. She's the Austria country general manager for IBM. And she has previously had senior vice president positions all over Germany and other places. She's filling in for us today. Another speaker had a very, very terrible cold. So we're really grateful, Patricia, that you stepped up with your background and credentials to help us today. So, go.
Thank you very much. It's great being here, an inspiring environment, a great place in the middle of Vienna and the historic part here. And I heard a lot of good things that happened yesterday and this morning already. So I couldn't agree more to what have been said already. So many interesting things. I mean, we as a company, IBM, has grown to where we are today because of innovation. So innovation is part of the DNA. It really helps us as people, as the world to move on. And innovation itself starts with people, starts with human beings, and the technology is the enabler, but it all starts with the humans. And I think what we see today is obviously what we've heard already, and it's obvious that the data and the inside of data is disrupting economy, is disrupting the business model. And we experience this as an enterprise, and we experience it very much as a consumer. So what I believe is that we have, first of all, when we handle with data, it's very important. It is trustful handling of data, and that starts with us, and it ends with the enterprises. The way we treat, or the way we implement technology today is very much in a platform economy approach. We've heard and talked this morning around platforms. We talked about ecosystems. So we see strongly in Europe, but all over the world, evolving platforms in all industries. So be it in the industry of the food industry, for example, in mobility, is it logistics, or is it the healthcare system? Platform, I believe, is the future for all of us, and all of us meaning enterprises and consumers. So to give you some examples, for example, what we do around the platform in the food industry, we call it the food trust. So big companies like Carrefour or Walmart or Mars are putting their data, their insight on a platform to understand how food is produced at one end of the world and is being transported and delivered to us as a consumer. And as we know, in particular on food, 50% of the food does not arrive on our plates. So we produce maybe too much, or we deliver or we ship in a not safety way, or at the end, we as a consumer, we simply buy too much and throw it away. So just imagine what technology could mean in terms of let's put our strengths as all players around the food chain together on one platform, create transparency where food is, and reduce the waste of food that could have a huge impact on the world. Another example on the platform business which is working, and we have more than 120 companies already on the platform, is around logistics. Maersk probably is familiar as the big global shipper and player here, but Maersk is only one player in a huge logistic chain, as you know. There are so many intermediates like banks, insurance companies, government authorities when shipping from one country to the other country, the harbors, so many players to ship goods from A to B. And the technology that enables to put all of us together on one platform is the blockchain technology at the end, and it helps to increase transparency, it helps to increase safety, and it, of course, makes things efficient, but above all, it makes things more secure. So we know at the end who we partner with, we know from where goods are coming from, and the big topic around security is being tackled here. Another example is, because I mentioned a lot of big players who put their forces together on platform, small players, startups. So we're working with a spin-off of BMW, Movester, and we put Movester and IBM together on a platform that allows a mobility platform that should address things like sustainability or pollution, provide the consumer alternatives, how to move with public transportation or with cars or whatever. So as you say, an incumbent like BMW building an ecosystem around a startup, and then again putting forces together with technology companies. Or if we leave the geography Europe and move to Africa, for example, we're working with a startup in Africa called Hello Tractor to address a challenge for small-scale farmers in Africa who probably cannot afford the tractor, maybe cannot afford to repair the tractor if it's ruined, to put together AI, Internet of Things technology with the tractors in Africa to provide to small-scale farmers a technology or a tractor at the point in time when it is required, to predict if a tractor is, for example, not running and needs maintenance, and to expand basically a technology in an area where these farmers really need help to tackle another issue, which is nutrition for the world. So a few examples where I think it's obvious, yeah, that platform and the bridge between this part of the world where there is incumbency, where there's experience over 100 years on technology, combining with what is emerging all over the world in terms of new companies or on startups. I talked a lot about technology as the enabler. I'm a very strong believer the role of technology is enabling and is always enabling for a certain purpose. So not technology just for the sake of, and digitization not just for the sake of, but for a certain purpose. And if we use technology for a purpose that helps us at the end to make something better, we are a huge step further. And we have a lot of good examples here. As I said in the beginning, will not work without the humans. It starts with us as humans. So taking along human here in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, highly critical. And again, here can help technology through education platforms to educate people and make knowledge transparent to everyone. Ending up, I would like to, it's in my opinion not an either or discussion. So it's not the either analog or digital, it's both. It's an and between analog and digital. And the same goes for machine and man. It's not the machine or the man. I'm a strong believer it will be and is the man and the machine.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is Georg Kopetz. He's founder of TT Technologies, and he was trained as a lawyer. It's so great. It proves lawyers can be entrepreneurs, right? Both here in Vienna and Paris. And he also has a subsidiary that he's president of in Italy. So again, a startup, but with a global perspective. Georg?
Thank you, Curtis. So I'm here representing a company that is in this wave to this new area of mobility that Young talked about, this mobility 2.0. And if you start a company, or if you grow a company, and I'm an entrepreneur, you always look at the market. And Peter Drucker said, outside is reality, inside is fantasy. Yeah? And if you can't serve a major market, you will not get revenues, you will not get funding. So the question is how to see the markets and how to see the big markets. And I think it's not only about the market, it's also then about the innovation element and how to basically balance the two, how to meet a market needs with the technology. And when we look into Europe and when we look into our strengths, our big industries like the automotive industry, like the industrial manufacturing, they are now transforming. They're really becoming digital. And becoming really, I don't want to repeat all the buzzwords, but there's really a big change happening. And this big change is a super opportunity for entrepreneurs to grow and to grow in new ways. And there are not only new companies coming up, also the whole way the value chain in the industry works is changing. We are really going to a kind of an ecosystem play. So what we know from the IT industry, what we learned from the digital industry is now coming into traditional industries just in front of our city limits. Yeah? We are also in the city of Vienna, so I can also relate to the smart city methodology. But we really see a huge opportunity here in Europe to not only build new companies, but also to transform industries with new ecosystems, which are global ecosystems. And I want to give you a few examples. So firstly, on a topic of autonomous technology. Young mentioned it's about the safety, but it's also about having the right interfaces defined between the different architectural elements that this whole complex system can work together. It's about the tooling, it's about the infrastructure. It's about working with the regulatory authorities to make sure what do we consider safe and when are we ready to go to higher levels of automation. And therefore we created together with Samsung and Audi and Infineon and other major partners, we created the Autonomous. This is a global platform to work on this ecosystem built up to really get the players here. And actually 2 months ago, we had here in this same location, we had a big event from Japan, Korea, China, US, Europe, all coming together and defining how can we in this global difficult environment that the different regions are going in different directions, how can we agree on some global understanding that we say, what do we consider a safety reference and how do we put up the interfaces in such an architecture? And I want also to relate to the experience of ARM. We not only have young Sohn on our board, also Hermann Hauser, who is also, I think, a Peter Drucker fellow in a way. And they were instrumental in building ARM. And ARM was not only European, it was also global. Yeah? So Cambridge to the world, and it built the super ecosystem of the world. Yeah? When we were a startup like 20 years ago, yeah, the first investor I asked for funding was Hermann Hauser. Yeah? Because I thought if he can do it with ARM, we can also do it here with another technology. So we are in a similar position. So with the MotionWise, we are trying to create this ecosystem, and we need entrepreneurs in this transformation. And I believe that empowering ecosystems will help us to also get to these entrepreneurial hotbeds and building on the strengths of this region here.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'd like to represent former President Tan from Singapore. I think it's easy to say that he's one of the most accomplished people, certainly in the history and growth of Singapore. He has a PhD in applied mathematics, and then he started in commercial banking, and for 3 years he was chairman and CEO of the Overseas Chinese Banking Corporation. As part of Singapore, he's been the Minister of Education, Minister of Trade and Industry, Deputy Prime Minister, Executive Director of the Government of Singapore Investment Corporation, and from 2011 to 17, he was the President of Singapore. I personally know Dr. Tan because I was part of the advisory board for the National Research Foundation, and I got to personally watch Dr. Tan as he built the innovation ecosystem, starting way back when with others, from almost nothing to now having an economy, a GDP per capita that's about 30% above the United States, with no water, no natural resources, no agriculture, no space, from that to what they have created today. I think it's hard to imagine anyone who's had a bigger individual impact on creating an innovation ecosystem. Certainly no one in the history of Drucker, I think, has ever come before with his experience at actually doing that. It's a great, great honor to have Dr. Tony Tan tell us how he built the innovation ecosystem of Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Good morning. I'm indeed very happy to be here to talk about the subject of entrepreneurship and innovation. For Singapore, which is a small country with no natural resources, entrepreneurship and innovation are critical for our survival, and we have to rely on human ingenuity and human effort to build our economy and society. Our homegrown entrepreneurs play a crucial role in Singapore's economic development. Their capacity to generate novel ideas, introduce new products, services, and business models serves as an important engine of economic renewal and industry transformation, creating value, creating jobs. Their role becomes increasingly important as the global economy becomes even more complex, with sectors disrupted by new technology and increasing competition for capital and talent. I would like today to share with you 3 thoughts on how we can build an entrepreneurial society. The first is the role of the government as an enabler. Second, the role of the private sector as a partner. And third, the role of the community in inspiring our youth. First, the role of government as an enabler. Governments play a critical role in nurturing a thriving startup ecosystem. They can help startups in various ways, providing them with access to funding, networks, infrastructure, and talent, as well as promoting a pro-enterprise environment that helps businesses to grow. In 2017, Startup SG was established by the Singapore government to develop a vibrant startup ecosystem with access to mentorship, financing, and overseas networks. In addition, just last week, Startup SG held the 3rd annual edition of Slingshot, Asia's leading deep tech startup competition. This attracted over 1,000 applications from more than 90 countries and gave some of the most innovative minds a launch pad to pitch their technology and business ideas to investors and corporate leaders. The Singapore government has also dedicated land and infrastructure to support the country's entrepreneurial journey. A 6.5 hectare space named Launchpad at One North has been developed for this purpose. This place offers a vibrant and nurturing environment for early-stage startups in the biomedical sciences, infocom, media, electronics, urban solutions, and engineering industries. Today, Launchpad at One North is home to a pool of over 5,000 entrepreneurial talents from around 800 startups and 50 enablers. There are also other schemes to help businesses and startups to attract talent. For example, the Agency for Science, Technology and Research, A*STAR, runs an initiative in which scientists and research engineers are seconded to aid in the research and development programs of small and medium enterprises for up to 2 years. These seconded experts share product development strategy, aid innovation in business processes, and assist companies to develop innovative products. Lastly, the government also provides innovative business ideas by reviewing rules to provide a pro-enterprise regulatory environment. The Pro-Enterprise Panel, PEP, is a private-public panel that was set up in 2002. It is chaired by the head of a civil service, comprises of business leaders as members, and is supported by a network of senior public officers. PEP serves as an internal advocate for businesses within the government to ensure that rules and regulations help and do not hinder businesses unnecessarily. Next, the role of the private sector as a partner. Entrepreneurship cannot be the sole responsibility of government. It is extremely important for experienced and successful entrepreneurs to lead and help other budding entrepreneurs. The Action Community for Entrepreneurship, ACE, is a national private sector-led organization to drive entrepreneurship and innovation in Singapore. ACE plays a key role in building a dynamic and sustainable startup ecosystem in Singapore. Over the years, ACE has supported more than 2,000 startups through various programs, engagements, grants, and deals. It's very important. ACE has a mentorship program that provides a platform for entrepreneurs to learn and obtain feedback from experienced business leaders and successful entrepreneurs who contribute their time, expertise, and advice pro bono. Finally, the role of the community in inspiring our youth. Nurturing the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators require molding and encouraging minds from a young age. We all know that not all startups will succeed. Many will fail. Some will fail repeatedly before achieving success. This model sometimes is at odds with traditional education systems and society which demand success and frown upon failure. In Singapore, we have started to make a paradigm shift in our education system away from an overemphasis on academic grades to focus on what we call holistic education. This requires a concerted effort from the whole community, from educators to parents. It is not an easy journey because it requires a mindset change. But we need to nurture the joy of learning and trying in our children. This intrinsic motivation will drive them forward to explore, discover their interests and passions. In addition, we also need to help our youth to develop an entrepreneurial dare so that they will apply what they learn, act on their passions, pursue them, and build companies. More than just promoting businesses or startups, entrepreneurial dare is an attitude, a mindset of pushing boundaries, of trying, of wanting to innovate, of finding a breakthrough. As a community, we need to embrace what we call applied learning, so that students do not just learn theories or facts, but they get to apply learning to real-world contexts and create opportunities. As a society, we need to create an environment where trying is encouraged, failing is accepted as a step to a success and as part of overall learning. Ladies and gentlemen, entrepreneurship is critical, I believe, everywhere, for corporations, for economies, for countries. For Singapore in particular, we see it as a matter of survival for our country to develop a strong entrepreneurial spirit amongst our people, which includes a never-say-die attitude, the courage to take calculated risks, creativity to develop innovative solutions, and resourcefulness and tenacity to pull it all together and create an enterprise. To achieve this, we need to have close collaboration and partnership between government, the private sector, and the community. Thank you.
Dr. Tan, in Singapore, learning and education is almost a religion. Very, very serious topic. And the change you're talking about is a very significant one. In my company, we were hiring straight-A PhDs from great schools around the world. None of them knew how to create value when they came. We had to train them all before they could be productive workers. And it's why I asked the questions at the beginning, how many people have actually been immersed in that kind of educational experience? It'd be really great to know what specifically is going to go on in Singapore to help give young people these skills. It's very important.
Well, Singapore traditionally, education systems have been focusing on very important things: examinations, grades, achieving good results. We believe now in today's world, which is changing rapidly, where technology is a great disruptor, we also need to encourage our young people to think ahead, to see what is the next step, and to see the world as an experimental place where they can play a part and they have the confidence to be able to create a new enterprise, to create values, to build something for society, and in that way to encourage themselves to enrich their own education so that it's not just a matter of absorbing facts, but also how to apply the facts, how to apply the knowledge to create new enterprises, new ideas, and new innovations to advance society and the economy. And it's a long road ahead. We are just starting on this for the last few years. It will not happen overnight because you can't change minds so quickly. It's not only the children which are involved, parents also have to be convinced. And sometimes that's more difficult than convincing the children. But we are getting there, and I am confident that going ahead, over time, we will have a generation of young people who will see the world as an opportunity, notwithstanding the problems, and who will create great ideas and bring them into reality. Thank you.
My guess is the world's going to have a lot to learn about how to do this from Singapore. Patricia, you heard Young, and you just heard Dr. Tan, and these things are coming together, and the world's going to be, I say it, the world's going to become transparent. When you have 4K teleconferencing, multiple cameras, AI technologies, ATSC3 video, all these things are coming together to basically open up Singapore and Vienna in a way that was never imagined even 20 years ago. What do you think, what's the big impact that you think that kind of world transparency is going to have?
So I think it's very amazing what you just described in Singapore, and I think we can learn a lot. There are a lot of elements that we can learn and take over, and in particular, I think on the transparency side, how we educate the access to information, yeah, to the continuous learning for all of us, and we all know how important that is. And it starts, as you rightly said, with the mindset, that all of us, we open up in a way. And I think that is, for me, one of the hugest impacts that we have through transparency, access to information. Yeah? And that information helps us to take smart decisions and so on. And additional to the transparency, if we add and if we fuel artificial intelligence, then we even become better in what we are doing. Today, this year we celebrate 50 years flying to the moon, and we landed on the moon because there were many and thousand people in technology helping, and today we brought the AI already to the International Space Station, but not to replace the man, but to help the astronaut doing even a better job. And that combination for me is amazing. I think what we also can learn from what we've just heard is the thing on how we teach or how we educate, or blended learning, or applied learning, as you correctly said. I mean, we talk often in our company, in IBM, there is no white or blue color. It's really a no-color type of person and human being we want to teach. For some parts of the job, yes, we need high proficiency, we need the university education, everything. But there are so many other roles when you found the company where probably a 12-month, 6-month boot camp can already bring you to a certain level of experience that gives you the courage to open up an enterprise, to start a new idea and dare something, as you rightly say. And last but not least, I think the failing culture, in particular in Europe, is something we can learn from. That's something we don't have in our hearts. Yeah? We fail, we are still don't like it very much. So that's a big learning piece as well.
Okay, I'd like to ask Young to talk about that. Also, a question about Sweden. Sweden 20 years ago said we're isolated, we're way up cold, it's dark in the winter. And they focused on the first generation of IT, taught kids gaming and that sort of thing, and that resulted in the first wave of Swedish entrepreneurship and success. All the things that you're talking about potentially open up a second wave. Do you think a region could grab that and take leadership in a...
Well, so the two comments I'd like to add. Clearly, I think there are much greater startup activities that are going on. Sweden, Switzerland, great example of companies with actually a lot of startups. But actually, the real jobs is not from startups. It's a scale-ups that matters. Companies like TTTech, they're creating 1,000 jobs. That's really where the jobs are. So I think we need to really think about the startup mentality to how do you create a scale-up, which requires, as President Tan said, require very close collaboration in many things that have to come together. So that's one, I think, very important message. I think the other, and to do that, obviously, the mobility and cloud and having the right talents are really important. I think the second point that we just talked about a little bit is still almost 50% of the world population is not and does not have access to the internet. So the access question is still a equality inclusion issues that we are given and granted here. And the other problem is also then as you're moving into, talking about 5.0, AI, data, how does the rest of the population going to keep up without internet and without education? So actually, President Tan, I don't worry about Singapore. I used to live in Singapore, and it's a great education system. The problem is not Singapore. Problem is somewhere else. And it's the other half of the population that does not have access, does not have education. Even large companies like Samsung, when we're moving jobs from manufacturing-driven jobs to knowledge jobs, many of them are left out. How do we train them? How do we get them ready for AI and data age? So when we say AI, we think about AI scientists. Actually, that's a real problem because there are only very few AI scientists that are coming out of great schools. We need to train anybody that touches spreadsheet, database, to become part of AI contributors. So we really have to think about how to include more people that are all the way from no access, all the way to even corporations like Samsung, where we have to retrain them, get them prepared for the future. Otherwise, we're going to have even more division of have and have-nots.
Good, great. Sascha, I'm going to ask you for... Yes. Sascha, I'm going to ask you if you would ask Dr. Tan a question that you've always been interested in. You've studied cities around the world. What's the one thing that you've always wanted to ask someone like Dr. Tan about what they did in Singapore?
I think I'm really interested in the question who is setting the agenda for technology and for the kind of entrepreneurship we want in our communities. I think you've reached an incredible level of many choices ahead. And like in many places, I'm interested in the question, what kind of entrepreneurship, if we have the choice, we want to reward in the future? What are the kind of qualities of the future economy and future society that you think are important to Singapore and going beyond economic success? Let's take that for granted, as hard as that is. So I'm really interested as to what your vision is, where society will go from here.
I think for us, as you say, the future, the way I look at it, is going to be more complex. It's going to be more difficult to discern where trends are now going. So to try and predict the future and to create a society around it, in my view, I think it's not possible today. What you can do is to have a frame where you anticipate what may come, and you try and prepare your people so that they will be able to take advantage of these trends. For example, in Singapore, we believe that with our present level of development today, with our open society, we will be able to continue attracting foreign investment. So it's not creating jobs that we are worried about. I think what we will be more worried about is whether our own people will have the ability and the skills to fill the jobs which are available. Because if we don't have enough such people, then we have to allow immigrants, foreign people to come in. That's possible, but politically, beyond a certain extent, as we have found in other countries, it becomes very difficult. And therefore, the Singapore government and our society has put a lot of emphasis today on what we call lifelong learning. That is to tell people that your learning, your education doesn't stop at school or at university. You have to reinvent yourself every few years to learn new skills, to remain employable. The government, through its platform, can provide you with opportunities, but whether your own people can take advantage of that is a different matter. In this respect, I must say that I don't worry about young people, because they will look after themselves. They have the opportunities, the agility. What I am most worried about are people in their 40s or their 50s who have been employed in traditional white-collar jobs, industrial jobs. They will find a very disturbing future ahead, because with AI, with robotics, many of the functions and jobs that are done today by human beings actually can be done more quickly, more efficiently by robots or intelligent machines. And for these people to continue to work, which I believe is very important. Work is not just a matter of earning a living. Work gives a person dignity, a purpose to look after his family. He has to learn new skills. And the government has a wide variety of programs to encourage people at all ages, including those in the middle ages, to learn new skills all the time and to have this mindset that you have to educate yourself and look after your own destiny going forward. I think that if you can spread this throughout society, we'll have a much better entrepreneurial society and better living for all.
Very good. George, looking ahead for the kind of ecosystems you work in around the world, what do you think people are going to be surprised about? What's going to happen? What's going to evolve that you think is about to emerge? The big surprise.
I think it's this kind of combination of local and global. I think you have to build, on the one hand, you have to build a local ecosystem, that you get the talent, that you have kind of the environment that people want to join us in Vienna or us in Shanghai or us in Silicon Valley, our company. On the other hand, you need to think global and to combine the two. You need to find, I think there will be a generation that will understand to work on both elements in parallel in combination with smart cities. And I think this will probably change a little bit the power structure on the globe. Today we are talking a lot about blocks and a lot about, I don't want to mention them, but the point is, I think it's going to be more around cities and around probably ecosystems. So that's kind of, I think this will be the surprise that I think they will rise in importance, and that we will see new alliances being built between smart cities and smart ecosystems, which will advance innovation. And one more element that I think is also very important is the mindset. Especially here in Europe, we don't have the growth mindset, or we're not bold enough often. We often think if we are good in Europe, that's enough. We don't think enough about the US, we don't think about enough Asia and about Africa. And I think in these digital technologies that we are now really introducing in many of our industrial industries, there's only a global, or at least the global perspective tends to win, and this winner takes it all markets. So if we have good technologies, we need to have the courage to take these technologies out to global markets and to have this growth mindset. I think that's also very important for the future. Okay.
Well, we have a few minutes left. I'd like to ask every one of you to tell the audience the one thing they must take away from this panel, the one thing that will have some influence on what they do, make an impact. Patricia, would you mind starting us with the big idea?
The big idea, yes. No, I'll probably it's repeating what I've said before, but first I believe technology is the #1 enabler for what is making a competitive advantage in the future or makes the society and the world better. So using technology for a certain purpose. Second, we heard about enablement and education. It's so important for all of us, and it starts with us, and it will not end. It will be lifetime. And third, I would like to end on this theme of and. It's not either or, it's man and machine. As we heard, it's local and global, and it's analog and digital. And I think with this inclusive approach, there is a huge chance for all of us in the future.
Okay, great. Sascha?
So I think going forward, we should be very careful in glorifying the technology entrepreneur. And I think we should be glorifying the social and urban entrepreneur, the people that will translate all the best that technology, innovation, but also compassion has to offer to solve the real problems we're facing.
Great. Georg?
I think it's about the role entrepreneurs have to play to build the ecosystems. So I think this is also what I learned from your presentations. I think there is a certain time, a certain attention we should spend in building ecosystems, even though they're not generating revenues immediately for us. But by contributing to build ecosystems, there will be opportunities coming to us that we can grow faster and we can win back. And I think that's also a little bit the secret of Silicon Valley, is this network of trust. People ask for something and you don't expect something in return, but if you are giving something to the network, it will come back somewhere. And I think if we spend a little bit more attention in giving, I think we can all also win a lot in this.
Great, thank you. Young. Yeah.
I think I said it earlier, I really believe that startups can contribute for many of positive things. So thinking of the tech for good in agenda will be really critical, that are inclusive of all groups that are out there that can benefit together. And hopefully great business comes from impacting other people, whether it's a health, education, better food, better water. So I hope that we can use that tech is not bad or good, it's dependent on how you use. And hopefully we have a much more energy going into the balanced world that we need going forward.
Good. Great. Dr. Tan, what should we look for?
Just one thing. Looking at, I could tell everybody, embrace the future. Do not fear it. By all means, look to the past to learn lessons by which you can avoid mistakes. We do not know what will happen. We don't know how technology will change things. But I'm optimistic that despite all the difficulties, we can create eventually a better world for all. And that must be our aim. We need to build great enterprises. We need to encourage our people, provide an environment where startups and scale-ups can happen. But at the end of the day, what we're all doing this for is for people. And that must be what will be uppermost in our minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, what a great panel, and the honor to have Dr. Tan here with us. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.